Hello, welcome to China Currents. I'm Chris. First, 端午节快乐! Happy belated Dragon Boat Festival. The past weekend, from June 22nd to 24th, was China's traditional Dragon Boat Festival, a holiday in which we get to eat 粽子, a kind of rice dumpling, and sail dragon boats. Originally, it's a traditional holiday that commemorates the life and death of the famous Chinese scholar Qu Yuan. Lately, it's become a time for people to reunite with families and go on vacations. The holiday weekend's weather, nonetheless, was intense. In northern China, temperature exceeded 37 degrees Celsius. The daily maximum temperature at 21 national stations have broken historical records. Beijing and Tianjin reached as high as 41.8 degrees Celsius, but in southern China, it's a completely different story. Heavy rain was pouring down, with up to 140 millimeters of rain in some urban areas. But none of that could stop the Chinese people from going out. Despite the weather, approximately 100 million people went on vacation. That was about 10% more than the pre-COVID average. Here's a clip of people participating in the traditional dragon boat race. Well, that was a ton of fun, right? That's not the end. People also packed up movie theaters. According to real-time data, as of June 24th, the total box office for the 2023 Dragon Boat Festival weekend exceeded 900 million, ranking second in the history of China's Dragon Boat Festival box office. The total number of moviegoers reached 22.25 million, with a total of 1.3 million screenings. The moviegoers are back in town. People on social media were praising the quality of the movies during the holiday weekend, which is an indication of the recovery of the entertainment industry from COVID. That's the Chinese optimism about the economic recovery. Next up, from June 18th to 19th, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited China. He was the first Secretary of State who visited China in 5 years. Last time it was 2018 during the Trump administration. Blinken's visit was originally scheduled in February, nevertheless, it was delayed by the so-called spy balloon incident. Using the Chinese government's words, the Sino-American relation is at the lowest point at this moment. Since Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan last August, the two countries have been in conflict over a number of issues, including US officials visiting Taiwan, the so-called spy balloon, US spying activities over the South China Sea, etc. On June 18th, Blinken held talk with Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang. According to Chinese state media, the 6-hour meeting was in-depth and constructive, which concerned the overall China-US relations, made agreement on 4 sectors, including maintaining high-level contacts. Well, when keeping communicating is the only consensus of a marathon meeting, it was obvious that both sides held quite a lot of differences over fundamental issues. On the next day, Blinken met with Chinese President Xi Jinping. According to Xinhua News, the meeting was merely out of courtesy. Xi called on the US side to adopt a rational and pragmatic attitude to avoid major country competition and to respect China's legitimate rights and interests. Of course, we have no idea what exactly were the fundamental differences that Blinken and the Chinese officials argued behind closed doors. Yet their press release revealed some clues. In Blinken's press interview, he specifically stressed, quote, "I reiterated long-standing US One China policy. That policy has not changed. We do not support Taiwan independence. We remain opposed to any unilateral changes to the status quo by either side." Unquote. Did Chinese people buy Blinken's words? Most likely not. On Chinese social media, netizens summarized Blinken's response and American policy toward Taiwan into one Chinese saying, 说一套，做一套. Say one thing and do another. After all, it's quite hard to persuade the Chinese people that the US is complying with the One China principle when it continues to send government officials to the island, not to mention its military presence in the Taiwan Strait. Another interesting point in Blinken's interview was his wording of One China policy. You may have noticed the Chinese wording for the similar stuff is One China principle. There is a huge difference to that. The One China principle means there is only one sovereign state under the name of China, with the PRC serving as the sole legitimate government of that China, and Taiwan is an inalienable part of China. But what exactly does America's One China policy mean? According to Blinken, it means not supporting Taiwan independence, opposing to any unilateral changes to the status quo by either side, and conduct the Taiwan issue within the framework of Taiwan Relations Act, the 3 joint communique, and the 6 assurances. Very vague and jargonish language, right? It's not our fault. So let me translate that for you. It means nothing concrete. The One China policy is a product of the so-called strategic ambiguity. You see, US and China did not have any formal diplomatic relations from 1949 to early 1970s. In 72, Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger went to Beijing. They were like, let's end our beef and fight the Soviet Union. Beijing agreed. Hey, great, let's put aside the differences and do a communique together. Hence, the 3 communiques that formed the basis of the Sino-American relations. Basically, the communiques were like, okay, here's a bunch of stuff that we don't agree with each other. Vietnam, imperialism, colonialism, blah, 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 blah. The list goes on. But hey, nothing is as important as countering the threat of Soviet Union. So let's be friends. But Taiwan is such a core issue to China. There was no way for the United States to dodge this one. They had to declare something. So here's what Nixon and Kissinger said. The United States acknowledges that all Chinese on either side of the Taiwan Strait maintain there is but one China, and that Taiwan is part of China. And the United States government does not challenge that position. Acknowledge, what a magical word. When relationship is great and no conflict of interest is formed, acknowledgement means acceptance, just like what the Clinton administration did. However, when the United States want to challenge the bilateral relationship, acknowledge suddenly becomes a classical imperialist word. It means, although America will not support Taiwan independence publicly, it nevertheless will try everything that it can to foster a de facto independence. The Americans were like, as long as we don't define our action as pro-separatism, they're not. Well, by this logic, all we need for world peace is a new dictionary that redefines war into peace. Easy, done. Is that what you got from Harvard? So, back to the original point. Does Blinken's promise on the One China policy mean anything? Hardly. America is using Taiwan to drag China, and US will foreseeably try everything to strengthen that drag. US's One China policy is a weak promise without any actual action. Is a promise a lie if it doesn't come true, or is it just something worse? People in Taiwan are thus, sadly, becoming America's tool in containing China over an issue that ought to be sorted out internally between the Chinese in both mainland and Taiwan. Next up, last week many Chinese received a text message from their telecom carrier. The text, carrying the commendation from the Central Publicity Department, praises the flying crew of the Air Force, listing them as role models of the times and applauding their courageous deeds in air combat in a new era. That text is unexpected and kind of vague. It did not mention the exact reason why this aviation unit got this commendation. By the way, it's one of the highest commendations in China. So people start to dig on the internet and become a hot trending topic on social media. So after some time of digging, netizens suspected that the aviation unit is responsible for driving away the Reagan aircraft carrier in South China Sea. According to a picture that shows the course of the USS Ronald Reagan, it took a dramatic, nearly 90 degrees turn in South China Sea, a move that large vessels seldom do. The Chinese state media lately reviewed the footage of the aviation unit, saying they had successfully driven away alien vessels and aircrafts. Well, you don't get a commendation on national level just because some small boats and outdated aircrafts. So the netizens' guesses have suddenly become plausible. The commendation happened at an interesting time as well. You see, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken had just left Beijing, and as we have just mentioned, the bilateral talk did not go on smooth. Also, during Blinken's visit, the United States did not pause its military action in South China Sea. So the commendation on the Chinese side can be seen as a response to both the talk and America's military action. Next up, the Chinese EV maker NIO recently received a large investment from the Middle East. On June 20th, NIO signed an agreement with Abu Dhabi investment firm CYVN Holdings, According to the agreement, the UAE fund will make a strategic investment of approximately $1.1 billion in NIO through a combination of issuing new shares and transferring existing shares. CYVN Holdings is an investment firm in which the Abu Dhabi government holds a majority stake. When the Chinese social media netizens considered money as a crucial investment for NIO as of this moment, since the company has been in debt for quite a long time. A lot of people thought UAE has done a great investment, for it has secured them a promising share in what could become the future giant in automobile industry. Last but not least, the Chinese tech giant Alibaba announced a shift in the board of directors. Zhang Yong, chairman and CEO of Alibaba Group Holding, will step down as chairman and CEO on September 10th of this year. At the same time, with the approval of the Alibaba Group Holding Board of Directors, Executive Vice Chairman Cai Chongxin will be appointed as chairman of Alibaba Group Holding. Wu Yongmin will assume the role of Alibaba Group Holding CEO. Chinese netizens see this as a result of Alibaba's failure in business in the past few years. The new CEO is perceived as a close ally of Jack Ma, who stepped down a few years ago. And the new chairman, Cai Chongxin, the owner of NBA team Brooklyn Nets, was one of the founding members of Alibaba. The change of Alibaba's board of directors reflects the company's dilemma. As many netizens commented, they have become less frequent users of Taobao, Alibaba's online shopping platform, in recent years. Alibaba is no longer as dominant as it used to be, and people are eager to see if the changes in board could save the company's future. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you for watching this episode of China Currents. If you have any thoughts or comments about our show, please feel free to reach us at the email address below. I'm Chris, looking forward to hearing from you. See you next week.